Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, the channel where we are making a computer role-playing game using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. If you've been following this series, you'll know that I have written a short list of spells that I wanted to program. I've programmed a way in which the player character can learn those spells, actually a couple of different ways in which the player character can learn those spells. I've programmed a way to display which spells, if any, the character knows, but I haven't programmed actually casting the spells. And in this video and the next few videos, I'd like to show you how I implement this magic system, how I program actually casting the spells. So as usual, I would like to show you what it looks like in play, and then I will get into the code and explain how the code works. So you'll notice that, well, you may notice that the player starts with the ability to cast the spell Opening the Way. We've got this little icon here. That is not a permanent change. I just had to do that for testing because, of course, in order to cast the spell in the game, you need to know it. And learning spells is takes a long time, and it's kind of there's not a reliable way to learn spells, and there's not a quick way to learn spells in this game deliberately. And so in order to test it quickly, I just decided to have them start by being able to cast the spell, and I'll get rid of that once I've finished with that spell and moved on to another. So you'll notice that the main play area doesn't look any different. I'll avoid these encounters because they're not what I want to show you. Okay, so you'll see that if we come to an area that has a direction and we can't go in that direction, we have a new icon, which will only come up if the player has this spell that they can cast. It's a bigger version of the icon for the spell, and if we hover over it, it says, click the green door to try to cast Opening the Way. So let's say we decide that we do want to cast that spell. We have a desperate need to go east for some reason. We click on that, and this time we were lucky. We roll a d20, and we got a 20, which counts as 25. I don't know if I've talked about this, but I did have it that a 20 was an automatic success and a 1 was an automatic failure, but I sort of changed it to a milder version of that, where a 20 counts as 25 and a 1 counts as -5. But anyway, we've rolled a 20, which counts as 25. We add the average of intelligence and will, which in this case is 7, and that was enough. So we were actually kind of lucky because our intelligence and our will are somewhat on the low side of average, but it says you complete the ritual and the rock opens before you. You might notice also that our oil went down by 10 minutes. The in-game sort of fiction is that this particular spell is it's not a sort of instant one where you just make a gesture and the spell happens. You have to perform a ritual, and also, of course, because there's a roll, it doesn't always work. But in this case it has worked, and we can see that where it was a 3-way junction, it's now a 4-way junction. It just creates a path. That's what the spell Opening the Way does. And we can travel along that tunnel as we would any other. So that is the spell. I'll just X out of that one, and I'll talk about the code that allowed me to do that. So here we have my rat's nest of a code. I've tried to make this code as clear as possible, but as you can see, it isn't particularly clear. It's quite messy and very difficult to see what leads to where. Twine is designed with sort of choose your own adventure stories in mind, and normally Choose Your Own Adventure stories have a structure which is easy to represent on a board. So you'll have this one goes to say these two, and then this two goes to these two, and then that either leads to a dead end, or that might loop around and go back to the first choice. And there's a sort of progression. It's basically linear with a few or several side paths, and perhaps more than one path. But what I've done is more like, it's not so much a choose. I mean, it is, in a sense, it uses links and stuff, but the layout of everything is all random. There's not a sort of built-in narrative of what happens. More or less anything can lead to more or less anything else. There's a lot of subsystems that get used in a lot of different places, like this roll and add system gets used. There's like 6 or 7 different areas that include that. So it's very difficult to lay anything out without lots and lots of crossovers and it becoming a great big rat's nest. So, I don't know a way to turn off. I'd like to turn off some of the arrows, perhaps, make it a bit easier. If I could perhaps only look at the includes, or only look at the go-tos, or something like that. Only look at the ones that only look at links that the player clicks, for example. That would make the structure quite a lot clearer. But I don't know that. I haven't been able to find any way to do that. If you happen to know of a way to do that, let me know. But I think this sort of, if you're doing the kind of story that I'm doing, I think this kind of structure is pretty inevitable, unfortunately. But anyway, so let's look at the data. Well, let's look at the code. So the first thing I did, of course, was the bit that's for testing only, which is set up the player being able to cast the relevant spell. And I'll zoom in a bit. There we go. I would recommend when you have a piece of code that you intend to lose later, surround it by comments that say testing only. That's what I always do. So if I forget, I mean, it's only, in this particular case, it's unlikely that I'd forget, but sometimes you might add 3 or 4 and you sort of only take 2 or 3 away and you forget that there's another one there. But at least when you come across it again, you'll see this and go, oh yeah, that's right, that's not meant to be there. So you'll remember, if you've been following the series, that we have the SL array, and SL1 is whether you can is set to 1 if you can cast spell number 1. SL2 is set to 1 if you can cast spell number 2, and so on. And then SL0 is how many spells the player can cast. So all I've done is set SL5, which is opening the way, to 1, and then set SL0 to 1 to indicate that the player character knows 1 spell. All right. So looking at the icon, that's quite easy. I have an array here which has in the middle, it has the sort of map picture, and then on the edge cells, it has the icons that you click to travel north are at the top, and then the icons to travel south are at the bottom, and then the icons to travel west and east are on either side. And all I need to do is, well, I'll show you what to do. This particular one is the icons for travelling north. So what we have here, this isn't an array, this is actually a string. You can have this format of like $W0 or 1 or whatever, as if you were referring to a slot of an array. You can also do that to strings. W0 means the leftmost character of the string, and then W1 is the second character, and then W2 is the third character, and so on. Computer stuff often starts counting from 0 rather than 1, and this is an example of that. So we have a string, and it's 4 characters, and it's all ones or zeros, and it indicates whether the player can move north in order: north, east, south, or west. So it's going clockwise. So, for example, 1100 would indicate that the player can travel north, can travel east, but can't travel south because that one's a 0, and can't travel west. So we say if W0 equals 1, and notice we have 1 in quotes. It's not, if we were dealing with numbers, it'd be like that, but we are looking for the character 1. So if W0 equals the character 1 and LO is over 0, LO is the lamp oil that you've got left. So if you've got lamp oil left, because if you haven't got lamp oil left, you're dead. You can't travel. Well, if you're back at the starting position, you're fine, but you can't travel anymore either way. If you're anywhere else, you're dead and sort of monsters eat you or something. So what this command is saying is if the player can travel north from here, do whatever's between this if and the else if. And what this just gives you the red rabbit icon and the white turtle icon. The red rabbit icon indicating swift travel, and the white turtle icon indicating sort of slow, cautious travel. That's not. And of course, if you can travel in that direction, there's no reason to cast Opening the Way on the rock in that direction. So that's not what we're concerned with. We're concerned with this. Else if W0 equals 0, i.e. the player cannot travel north, or W0 equals quote 0 quote, because again we're dealing with text, and SL5 equals 1, SL5 being the spell Opening the Way, and again lamp oil's over 0, because if lamp oil equals 0, you're not casting any spells, you're done for. And we have this image, which is also a link, and which also sets this variable to a particular value. And then we have else, and we just give the a sort of blank a blank picture, if you will, a picture that's entirely transparent, which means that you can't go in that direction, and you don't know how to cast the spell that might open a tunnel in that direction. Now, why would you print a picture that's entirely transparent? Well, it's to center the array so that the picture doesn't sort of move around. So imagine if you had a tunnel going west but no tunnel going east. Well, you'd have the rabbit and turtle icon, then you'd have the main map picture, and then you'd have nothing. Well, the center of that would be slightly different to if you had the red rabbit icon, the map picture, and then the red rabbit icon and the turtle again. In other words, if it didn't print anything, the sort of map picture would sort of move around depending on which directions you could go in, and I thought that would look a bit amateur. So I've got this picture which is the same size as the other icons, but doesn't display anything. It's just entirely transparent, to kind of keep it centered, keep it always the same. So that's why I've done that. I don't know if I've explained that before, but anyway, the bit that we're interested in is this. Now, we've looked at this structure before. This is an image. We have image, text. It's a bit long, so I'll type out the structure so it's a bit easier to see. We have image, text. We have a vertical line. We have okay. So here's what we do. We have square brackets, IMG, square brackets, the text which will come up if the player hovers their mouse over the picture. We have a vertical line. We have the address of the picture to display. Where is it in relation to the main game file? Close square brackets, open square brackets. Destination, what page do we go to if this is clicked? Then we have square brackets, and what variable changes do we make? And then end square brackets, end square brackets. Now, both the destination and the variable changes and the text, not both, all of those three are optional. You don't have to have any hover text. You don't have to have a destination that it takes you to if you click on the picture. In fact, usually the pictures don't send you anywhere, I would imagine. And you don't have to have any variable changes that happen as a result of clicking that picture. But in this case, we've done all three, and that's why it looks a bit complicated. So we have square bracket, IMG, square bracket, click the green door to try to cast opening the way. That is the text, the hover text that comes up, or the mouse over text, it's also called. We have vertical line. We have map/arrows/door.png, which is just the address of the green door icon. And then we have, I didn't intend any pun about the older people will know the song What's Behind the Green Door. That wasn't a pun. Younger people will wonder what the hell I'm talking about. But anyway, that wasn't in my mind. I just thought of it then. So what do we go? Map/arrows/door.png, end square bracket open. So it's going to the page open, which we'll look at next. And then we have end square bracket, and then we have square bracket DE to 0. Now DE is direction, where 0 equals north, 1 equals east, 2 equals south, and 3 equals west. So it's the same as the as this here, where we have W's. If W0 equals the character 0, refers to whether the player can go north, and similarly here we'll set the direction to north. So that is the command for displaying the opening the way icon to the north. Now, of course, there are four of these, because you might have to display one to the west and to the east and to the south. The only differences are it's if W, instead of W0, it'll be W1 for east and W2 for south and W3 for west. And the other difference is that the DE to 0 will be DE to 1, 2, or 3. So it appears 4 times, but it's not worth showing you each of the 4, because the only difference is this direction and which character in the W array is the relevant one. So in other words, we have this icon, and the player can choose to click it, and that attempts to cast the spell. So, and I've got a little note to myself here that says DE is the direction in which the player is trying to cast the spell. We need to keep track of that, because it only opens one tunnel, and we need to know which one they're trying for. So we set LO to be LO -2. LO is lamp oil. 1 unit of lamp oil is in the fiction of the story equal to 5 minutes. And then it says, if you've sort of been very foolish and haven't been keeping track of your lamp oil, it says your lamp runs and LO is less than 1. Your lamp runs out of oil before you can complete the ritual, and you are helpless against the monsters of the underworld. Then we set Z equal to spell, and we include the roll and add page. Now, I'm not going to go through that in detail because I have dealt with that before. All it is that's the page where you roll a d20 and add relevant attributes, and Z would normally be the name of an attribute, because normally if you're rolling against intelligence or dexterity or whatever it may be, so it'd be the abbreviated version. So it'd be int, dex, will, str, the ones that appear on the character sheet when you're playing the game. But in this case, it's spell, and if we go to roll and add, I won't go through everything, but it knows that if Z equals spell, well, that means use the average of intelligence and willpower, which is AV2 plus AV6 over 2, and then rounded so that it's not a fraction. But back to the main screen. So roll and add will give us RR, which stands for roll result. And what happens depends on whether we get at least 21 or 20 or less. So in this case, high rolls are good. Usually high rolls are good. There's a few exceptions that relate to the size attribute, but normally a high roll is good. So I'll show you the low result first, because that's a lot simpler. So this is all if the roll is high. Well, if the roll is low, you just get the message. You spend 10 minutes trying in vain to cast a spell, and then you get a single link that you click to continue, and it takes you back to the map. You can keep trying to cast the spell. The cost of the spell is the 10 minutes that it takes to cast. And if you're prepared to spend 10 minutes each time, well, so be it. I don't have any sort of wandering monsters type encounters in this game yet, but I might add them later, and so spending time sitting in a passage trying to do something might be more of a risk than it is now. But at the moment, you can just keep trying to cast the spell, and the only danger is that you lose track of time and run out of time. But let's say that you were successful. Let's say that RR was over 20. Well, the array that we're talking about is M. M is a two-dimensional array. So M3, 4, for example, will be the passages for the location that is three junctions east and 4 junctions north of the starting area. So a lot of these areas are negatives. Sometimes in arrays, often in arrays, you only use the positive numbers, but in this particular case, we count the starting position as 0, 0, and of course you can go north, south, west, or east freely, and so you're just as likely to get into the negative numbers as the positive ones. And that's fine. Twine doesn't have any problem with negative, arrays with negative values for one of their directions. So we have to update the relevant value M. So what we do is we set. No, I've lost my place. There we go. Okay, so we set Z. Z is a temporary variable. We set Z to just be quote quote, which means an empty string, a string with 0 characters. We have a for next loop, which goes from 0 to 3. And if Y is equal to DE, which you'll remember is the direction in which the player is trying to cast a spell, if Y equals the direction, then we set Z equals Z plus quote 1 quote. Now, that means something different to if we were working with numbers. If we were working with numbers and it was like that, set Z equals Z plus 1, that would mean take the value of Z and increase it by 1. That's not what it means when you're working with strings. What we've got here, set Z equals, or set $Z equals $Z plus quote 1 quote. What that means is set Z to be equal to its current value with a 1 on the end. So plus means something different when you're working with strings. it means add. It doesn't mean add them together. It just means add the other one, add the new thing on the end. So otherwise, set z equals z plus the yth character of m cx cy. So cx is your current x location and cy is your current y location. So look at m cx cy, which is a string, then look at the yth character, and that's the value that you should add to z. So after that loop is over, we will get something that is almost equal to m cx cy. The only difference will be the one case when y was equal to de, where that became a 1. So in other words, we'll have the current set of tunnels, but one of the zeros will have changed to 1. And that, of course, is what we want, because we know that that's what the spell is. The spell is opening up a tunnel if it's successful. And then we set m cx cy equal to z. In other words, we update m cx cy with this new setup where there's a new tunnel. Now, unfortunately, we're not yet done. And the reason we're not yet done is that I have stored, having each location with information about all 4 of its tunnels is slightly inefficient, because you're storing every piece of information twice. So for example, let's say you're on 0, 0. Let's say you're looking at M00. Well, M00 will have information about whether there's a tunnel to the north. But then think about M01. Well, that will have information about whether there's a tunnel to the south. But that's the same information. Whether 00 has a tunnel going north is the same information as whether 00... Sorry, whether 00 has a tunnel going north is the same information as whether 01 has a tunnel going south. They're the same. They're referring to the same tunnel, as it were. So it's slightly inefficient. I set it up like that because it makes it easier to get that information. But it does have the disadvantage that when you open up a new tunnel, you have to record that fact in 2 different places, in the sort of place where you are and also in the place where the tunnel leads to. The other way to do it would have been to have, you could have had an array for all of the north-south tunnels, and you could have had an array for all the east-west tunnels, and each tunnel would only be recorded once. I decided not to do. I mean, it's just as good, but it's a little bit more long-winded to get the information. So, for example, if you were looking at the tunnel north, you might say, okay, we'll look at north-south cx cy, and for the south tunnel, look at north-south cx cy minus 1 or something like that. But anyway, that's another way to do it. I decided not to do it that way. The disadvantage of doing it the way that I did is we've got to possibly set up, we've got to update sort of 2 different places. If we didn't do that, it would be a one-way tunnel. And I suppose you could just say, well, the spell creates a magic tunnel that's one way, but I thought that was a bit cheap, a bit what's the word? A bit of a bad spell, because what if you went that one way and then there weren't enough tunnels to go back or something like that? I thought maybe it would make the spell not good enough to use. So I've done it so that it makes 2-way tunnels. So here's how we do that. Anyway, we set these 2 temporary variables, which are cxx and cyy, and they are equal to cx and cy. And then we change either cxx or cyy depending on the direction. So if DE is 0, in other words, if the direction that we open this tunnel is north, we set cyy++, which means we add 1 to cyy. And the reason for that is, if the tunnel is going north, the place that it goes to has our current x value, but its y value is 1 more than our current y value. So in other words, if we're in 0, 0, or if we're in, let's say, 1, 1, and we open a tunnel north, that tunnel will go to 1, 2. So by doing this, by setting CYY++, we end up with CXX and CYY being equal to the place where the tunnel goes. And the same is true, else if D equals 1, increase CXX, etc., etc. D equals 2 is CYY is minus minus, D equals 3 is CXX minus minus. Now you notice those are the only possibilities. D can only be equal to 0, 1, 2, or 3. You'll notice I've got this thing which I often have just to catch any errors, which is at the end I have else error unknown value for DE, because this shouldn't ever happen. And I've set it up so that if there is somehow a value for DE that isn't 0, 1, 2, or 3, in which case I want to know that. I want to know that I've done something wrong. It'll generate this error rather than just having this one be an else and always doing that one, because then that might make the program continue to operate and sort of hide an error, and that might be harder to find in the end. So I want to know if there's an error, I want to know it as quickly as possible. So I often, when there's long ifs and else ifs, I often put this option at the end that if you can't find any other options, print that there's an error and you don't know what's happening. Okay, so we've got CXX and CYY, which is the destination area, I suppose. And then we have this if m square bracket $CXX n square bracket $CYY n square bracket. Normally you'd expect something after this, like so if m CXXY equals 2 or equals a particular text or something, but it just says if m CXX CYY. What that means is, if you've got something like that, if and then a variable, what that means is just if that cell has been given a value at all. In other words, if that's an area we've explored, then we need to do all this stuff. If we haven't explored it yet, we don't need to do anything, because we will it'll be taken care of when and if we get to that area and set up its m value. But if we've already set up its m value, we need to change it. So we include reverse direction. I won't go through that. All that does is change. So if D equals 0, which is north, it changes it to 2, which is south, and vice versa, and so too for east and west. That's what reverse direction does. And so we have this very similar loop where we set Z to equal to an empty string. We have a for next loop. If Y equals DE, and remember this is now the reversed DE, we set Z equals Z plus the character 1. Otherwise, we set Z equals Z plus M CXX CYY. And then so we end up with a string which is the same as M CXX CYY except for one new tunnel. And then we put that in the M slot CXX CYY. In other words, we update this destination place. If necessary, we update it to have a new tunnel. And then we just have a text which says you complete the ritual and the rock opens before you. And you press continue and you go back to explore and you see your new tunnel and presumably go down it, because that's presumably why you cast the spell. So that is an example of how to have a spell that isn't what might be called the cliche type of spell. There's a bit of a tendency for spells to be artillery, I think, and to have lots of different spells that are different ways of sort of hurting monsters that you're fighting, and that's something I've tried to avoid. A downside of that is it's difficult to program. Each one of them is going to be, require different programming. They're not just sort of variants of each other, but that's a price that I've decided is worth paying. So I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.